So you've got a 20-gallon fish tank. I've got a few ideas on how to stock it. Before you guys say anything, this tank right here is not a 20-gallon tank, it's a 29-gallon tank. However, the two tanks in the background here and here are both 20-gallon tanks. One is a 20-gallon standard, aka a 20-gallon tall, and the other one is a 20-gallon long. So this is a standard 20-gallon fish tank, aka a 20-gallon tall. It measures exactly 2 feet wide by about 17 inches tall, including the rim. This is a 20-gallon long fish tank. It measures exactly 2.5 feet wide by just over a foot tall, including the rim. Now, some of the suggestions that I'm going to make will be better suited for a 20-gallon long, and some of the suggestions that I'm going to make may be better suited for a 20-gallon standard or 20-gallon tall. So my very first suggestion, which will work in either a 20-gallon long or a 20-gallon tall or standard, is a tropical fish community. This is going to be your most popular setup. It's what I have in this 20-gallon tall right here. It's also what I have going on in my 29-gallon. And that is where you have a schooling fish, a bottom dweller, and a centerpiece fish. So for the schooling fish, something like neon tetras or rummy nose tetras or harlequin rasboras or something along those lines would work. I would suggest you get somewhere between 6 and 10 of that schooling fish, depending on the stocking of the other fish in the tank. For the bottom dweller, you can get another schooling type of fish like coolie loaches or cory cats, but if you do that, keep in mind that's going to limit the number of the other schooling fish that you have. For example, I wouldn't get 10 neon tetras and 10 coolie loaches because then your tank is completely stocked and you have no room for a centerpiece. For a bottom dweller, you can also do a smaller type of catfish that doesn't require it be in a school. However, if you do that, make sure you have a 20-gallon long and not a 20-gallon tall. And for your centerpiece fish, there's all sorts of different options. You can go with a honey gourami or a dwarf gourami, or perhaps a betta fish, depending on the temperament of the betta fish. If you get a betta fish as your centerpiece, I've noticed that the females tend to do better in community settings than the males do, just in general. There are some male betta fish whose temperaments are just fine in community tanks, and if your male betta fish is like that, then that's great. But overall, I've noticed that female betta fish tend to do better in community setups than males do, just in my own experience. Another option for your centerpiece would be a ram, like a German blue ram, for example, or an electric blue ram, or perhaps a pair of apistogrammas. And also, in some cases, maybe even a single or a pair of angelfish if you have a 20-gallon tall. My next suggestion for a 20-gallon tank is actually the live bearer tank. You can get a group or a community of live bearers and they will generally keep their own population up. I'm talking about guppies or mollies or platies. If you get mollies, beware, they are a brackish fish, and out of the 3 types of live bearers, they're the ones that do the worst in softer water. But if you don't want to mess with brackish water, then platies or guppies may be the way to go. The thing I love about live bearers is they come in all sorts of different colors, and you really have a lot of control over what you do with your live bearer tank. You can choose to just have live bearers of certain colors or certain styles. For example, you could have only orange swordtails if that's what you want. Or you can go with what I like to call the mutt guppy tank, which is where you have guppies of different colors and different tail types, and you have an array of colors in your tank, and you never really know quite how each guppy is going to turn out as they grow and mature. And it's really interesting to watch mutt guppies develop. If you're wanting to breed guppies or platies for the sake of selling them, I would suggest that you go with more of a pure strain rather than the mutt route. But if you just want to see an array of colors in your tank, then the mutt route may be the way to go. My next suggestion for a 20-gallon tank is the pea puffer tank. I personally have a 10-gallon pea puffer tank that currently has 2 pea puffers in it. The thing about pea puffers, though, is that they're very highly territorial, and so for every 5 gallons of water, it's recommended that you have 1 to 2 pea puffers. So for a 20-gallon tank, I would suggest you get no more than 4 to 6 pea puffers. This has nothing to do with their bioload. This is actually going to be a very light bioload for that size of tank, but this has more to do with how territorial and aggressive they are. They don't generally get along with other fish. They do okay with each other as long as they have enough space per fish, but I would not recommend putting other fish in there. However, people on fish forums often say that there's one type of fish that they tend to generally ignore, and that is the autosynclus catfish. Ottos are these cute little adorable catfish that people like to get for algae control. And in a tank with pea puffers who are known to eat snails, algae controlling fish might actually be the way to go. Now, something to keep in mind about Otto sinkless catfish is that they are a schooling fish. So you do need to keep proper numbers of them. I would say that the bare minimum number that you should get is at least 3 of them. However, it's preferred that you get at least 5 or 6. Also, something to keep in mind with both pea puffers and Otto sinkless catfish is that the majority of the time, both of these species of fish are going to be wild caught. So far, everything that I've talked about on the list has been all captive bred fish. Pea puffers and the Otto sinkless catfish, these are generally wild caught fish. So if you have a problem ethically with keeping wild caught fish, that's something to stay away from. If you don't have a problem with that and you want to keep them anyway, then make sure that you give them a proper quarantine, both in the amount of time that they're kept in quarantine, as well as the medications that you give them while they're in quarantine. You want to treat them for parasites, both internal and external. You want to treat them for possible bacterial infections, and you want to treat them for ick before they end up in the 20-gallon display tank. Another good suggestion for a 20-gallon fish tank is keeping a single fancy goldfish. Although goldfish generally do best in groups, they're not really a schooling fish, and they can be kept singly. And if you're going to keep a single goldfish, 20 gallons is the minimum amount of water that you will need. I know a lot of people like to keep goldfish in bowls. I think that's terrible. Or keep a goldfish in a tiny tank. That's also terrible. Fish don't grow to the size of their tank. That is an old myth. And if you do manage to stunt a fish's growth, it's going to have all sorts of health problems. Also, goldfish are very messy. They eat a lot and they poop a lot. And so you're going to need a higher volume of water just to keep that water clean. And that's why 20 gallons per goldfish is the recommended water volume. So if you have a 20-gallon fish tank, keeping a single goldfish in there with no other fish may be the route that you want to go. Another great option for the 20-gallon fish tank is the shell dweller tank. I personally have one of these. This tank that's just right here, just barely on screen, is a 20-gallon long shell dweller tank. And the shell dwellers that I have are the Neolamprologus multifasciatus, aka the multis. These are the same shell dwellers that Rachel O'Leary has and has made famous on her channel. Also, in addition to the multis, there's also the similis, which is another option for the shell dweller. Both of these species have the same requirements, being African cichlids from Lake Tanganyika, other than the filter in the water and maybe a heater to keep the temperatures right. They just need sand and shells. I like to give mine rocks as well. It gives them a little more area to hide in and explore, but for the most part, they're going to live in shells. You can get a bag of escargot shells on Amazon for really cheap. That's what I, as well as many other people who keep these fish, use. I also have a few different shells in there as well of varying sizes and styles, just to give the fish some options. If you're looking for something a little bit more advanced, you could go for the BETTA sorority tank. Now, this is a very highly controversial tank because bettas do best as solitary fish. But a BETTA sorority can work because the females can sometimes live together if they have the proper temperaments and if they're given the correct conditions. By correct temperaments, I mean they need to be more docile females. Your more aggressive and territorial ones will not work in a sorority tank. And by proper conditions, I mean that they need to have lots and lots of coverage and hiding places. A very heavily planted tank is the ideal route to go for a BETTA sorority. Never ever keep males in a BETTA sorority tank, only females. Not even just one male. The males are just far too territorial, far too dominant, far too aggressive to be kept with other bettas. For a BETTA sorority, you need to have a bare minimum of at least 5 female bettas. However, it is recommended that you have somewhere between 7 to 10 female bettas in the tank. However, 5 is the minimum that is needed in order for them to form a proper hierarchy. They form what's called a pecking order, which is really just their social hierarchy. There's going to be a tank boss, and there's going to be the lowest one on the food chain. And it's also recommended that you introduce all of these bettas to the tank at the same time, or that whenever you introduce a new betta, you remove all of the bettas from the tank, you rearrange everything in the tank, and then you introduce all of them at the same time as well. You should not just be adding a new betta to the tank without changing anything in the tank, because they will all claim their own individual territories in the tank pretty quickly. And whenever you add a new betta to the tank, they won't have a territory to claim. Now, do keep in mind that a sorority tank can be stressful on the bettas that live in it, because they're generally a solitary species, and keeping them together kind of stresses them out. And stress is known to weaken a betta's immune system. It is highly, highly recommended that each betta goes through a proper quarantine with preventative medications before going in that tank. That means that you're going to have individual tanks to quarantine each betta in for a minimum of 2 weeks to a month before introducing all of them at the same time to the sorority tank. And that is one of the many reasons that I say the betta sorority is only for advanced fish keepers. I do not recommend that someone just getting into the hobby try the betta sorority tank. If you have less than a year or two of fish keeping experience, don't try the betta sorority. Maybe just get a single betta and keep it in there with some schooling fish and some bottom dwellers instead. And my final suggestion is if you have a 20-gallon long aquarium, then maybe don't get fish. Maybe get an amphibian, perhaps an axolotl. I have an axolotl in a 20-gallon long aquarium right now. Her name is Amy, and I've had her for about a year and a half. I've done a few videos on axolotls myself, so if you're interested in keeping an axolotl, you should go check out my playlist linked up in the corner right now. Axolotls do have very specific requirements that I will briefly cover here. They require cooler water temperatures in the mid-60s. They require that you don't keep them on gravel or rocks or anything that they can possibly get into their mouth. They need to be kept on either sand or tile or a bare bottom tank or something like that. And you can't just feed them fish food like you do your other fish. You have to feed them a diet of worms. Something like flakes just won't work for them. 20 gallons is the minimum amount of water per axolotl that you need. They can be kept in pairs or groups, but you need bigger fish tanks for that. So if you have a 20-gallon tank, I would get no more than one. Axolotls require a bare minimum of a 2-foot wide tank, which is a 20-gallon standard. However, they do much better in a 20-gallon long, which is 2.5 feet wide. It's the same volume of water, but that extra floor space seems to do a lot better for them than the extra height in a 20-gallon standard does. Well, there you have it, guys. That's my suggestions on a few things that you could do with your 20-gallon fish tank. If you have any other suggestions, make sure you leave them down in the comments for me. I love hearing from you guys, and I'm sure that there's a lot of ideas that I missed when making this list. If you like this video, make sure you hit that like button down below. And also, if you're not subscribed to me and you made it this far into the video, you probably should be. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and also the notification bell. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.